Austin barbecue is amazing. You have multi-generational Central Texas history, and then you also have craft barbecue restaurants. One of the things that really kind of separates us is our approach to seasoning, flavor profiles, and counterpoints in our sides. How are we doing? Order coming in. I am African American, and so a lot of what we do here is inspired by, say, familial dishes, or inspired by recipes or things that were eaten in family gatherings, inspired by history, heritage, culture, which also ties into the overall origins of American barbecue. So here we are in the morning, the grand, illustrious, smallest barbecue trailer in town. We got these pork spare ribs that we're gonna get trimmed up and seasoned. We're doing full spares, but we are gonna take the chine off and do like a light trim on this. So we're just looking for this knuckle right here, and then we're just gonna drive the knife down. And I'm using a chef knife versus a boning knife because I need something with a little more backbone so that I can get through this cartilage. Looking on the spare, then we have this skirt here, which is great. You know, this has so many uses, you know, marinated on skewers, things like that. For us, we save this and then it goes into the grind for our sausage. We do have the Texas Trinity represented. So we're talking about sausage, we're talking about ribs, and we're talking about brisket. So we leave the membrane on for two reasons, right? Like, the great temperature is going to get that kind of like crisped up, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then it also allows us to get these ribs nice and tender and that they still adhere to the bone. We're going to apply our salt first. And so what that's going to do is it's going to start drawing out some of the moisture in the meat, right? And then we're going to start seeing like that little bit of like wetness. Then when we go to apply our spice, it's going to adhere to the meat a bit better. This side's a little bit thinner, so we're gonna go a little bit lighter on the salt on that end. We're gonna apply salt a little bit heavier where the meat is a little bit thicker. So this blend is our house blend. We call it newspaper rub, that really old school rub that has like the black pepper and like red chili in it. So like newspaper rub. What's a newspaper? It's black, white, and red all over, right? There is African bird chili in here, as well as some pimiento or allspice, and a couple other trade secrets, along with 16 mesh pepper, which gives that nice cracked black pepper flavor, but also gives it a great texture. Malagueta pepper is one of our linchpin seasonings, and that's a strain of pepper that originates in West Africa. So that's something that we incorporate into our rub, as well as using bird's eye chili or piri, so African bird's eye chili. We're also using pimiento or allspice, which is a touchstone ingredient from the Caribbean that also ties into the very complex, you know, story of the movement of people and the interchanges of cultures and cuisines that make this amazing thing of barbecue. And so we're getting nice and even on here. Nice and even, nice and even. So we're top racking these because we want to get a nice bark formation, right? And this runs a little bit hotter than the bottom. So we're, you know, facing our knuckle sides facing this way. In 45 minutes, we're gonna do a rotation and spin them. And then after that, you know, you're gonna see we're gonna wrap them and then invert them. Once we flip them, we don't really want that heat on the flesh side, right? So you're gonna see when we wrap that, we're gonna make a pillow on the bottom to elevate it and insulate it off the rack. This is the chicken leg quarters. It's a fan favorite, has been since the very early days of the truck. They come in with the spine split. This leg quarter has like really great chicken flavor, and especially like this chicken back and like the oyster meat, all this good stuff is super packed with flavor. And also it has the highest fat content. Skin side is starting down intentionally, just that way once we apply our seasoning, it stays nice and even. The chicken leg quarters is a jumbled rice dish. Other ways to think about that dish are jambalaya, The chicken, ironically, kind of became the thing that the truck was first like known for, which seems interesting, right? Because we're in Central Texas. There's a few places doing chicken, but that became one of those runaway items. And it goes pretty fast. We're going salt first, tapering on the season, applying just slightly heavier in the thicker areas. We got skin side down. This one is like a savory, spicy rub. It also does have like a little bit of black pepper in there as well, a little bit of ground mustard. Everything is seasoned a certain way for a reason, and that you end up having like a harmony on the plate of all the different things that you eat. And once you eat it all together, it creates the overall, experience. Get this seasoned and then we'll get this on. So these generally take about 3 hours. We're doing it skin side down. We use the heat of the grate to set the skin, and then we flip it to then desiccate the skin a little bit, but leaving the interior, the chicken leg quarter, nice and moist. We know that this thigh is thick, so we're facing that towards the fire, right? And we do the same thing with the pork shoulders, right? Like we face the blade, the shoulder blade towards the fire, right? They're gonna be crispy when they come out of here. We're on a mill scale 1,000-gallon offset smoker. We're not running an insulated firebox. It helps us control the temperature nicely. That way, if we get any temperature spikes, we got that air gap in there, so it's not like a runaway freight train. We're using pecan mainly for its flavor profile. Pecan is actually the largest species of hickories. It's also the state tree of Texas. We want to taste the meat, but we also want to be able to taste like the nuances of our spice blend that we add there. The wood adds like a subtle, very, very mild sweetness to the meat, but it's also a little bit softer. So it allows those flavors to kind of ring through, showcasing the wood itself as well as the meat. At this part of the day, we're trying to build the coal bed for, the rest of the day. So up here in the first door, we have the smoke roasted peanuts. They're roasting nice and even, pulling them out. So going for like deep golden brown, and then the interior. So one of the things that you can do is you gotta split it and ensure that it's like roasted on the interior. So these are very, very, very close, if not done right now. The importance of the peanut is that this is a complete tie-in to what the trailer speaks to, which is African diaspora, shared heritage, history. And so the peanut is a central ingredient to that. We know in the United States that peanut farming and cultivation has been a staple of, African-American agriculture since the first ancestors, and George Washington Carver's work with that legume specifically. Now that these are cool enough to touch, they're getting transferred into a bowl, and then we're gonna season them. This is just regular vegetable oil. That way the spices and the salt can actually adhere and then penetrate into the nut. So then I'm gonna go with the salt, pretty liberal. The blend is pretty specific to go with the peanut, but it's like mixing and matching some of the other spices that we have. Like we said, on the tray, we want cohesion, right? So there's like certain spices that as you're eating it, it's in the background. It's just a flavor that helps tie all the components of the tray together. I mean, we literally sold 1.5 gallons of peanuts within 45 minutes yesterday. I'm dead serious. It sold out before the brisket. That never happens. Yeah, so massaging the oil into the nut, working the spices into the nut. You can see that they've got this sheen to them. Gotta taste them, gotta taste your food, make sure that it's seasoned. Hey, that's pretty rare that I get it just like first try. So on our menu, it serves as like a snackable item, but it's also a ubiquitous item. It's something that everybody gets on the tray, and it's there for this reason. It's just kind of like the icon of the concept, right? It's a great beer nut as well. So we're about 8 to 9 hours into our cook for today. So we have pork here, briskets. So we're gonna be coming up on the afternoon wrap, and then it's gonna get rested, and that's for service tomorrow. We have 2 different spritzes. Instead of like a traditional style mop, we're applying our liquids have been strained, and they're in spray bottles. So we've just given these like a nice little wet down. And so not only are we applying like acid and an extra layer of seasoning there, but we're also, aiding in the bark development, because by putting that moisture on the exterior of the meat, we're gonna capture a little bit more wood smoke on there. When you're talking about the history of American barbecue, we're talking about wood burned down to coals and smoke coming from rendering fat and juices, but then also the application of, mop sauces over the top. There are accounts that talk about this. You have African Americans or enslaved Africans applying these mop sauces, and so common threads that you're gonna find in those stories is acid. I'm thinking about the counterpoint of acid cutting through richness and fat.
We're gonna wrap up these long cook items. We finished getting the smoke flavor on the meat. So now it's time to make sure they render properly. So what I'm doing right now is just getting one last spritz on here. With the pork butts, we're making pulled pork. Pulled pork sandwiches, we do pulled pork by the pound. So that's why we wrap it in foil. It's actually gonna create more steam. You wanna wrap it real tight, holds in that heat, almost braises it until we can pull it. Briskets are gonna go on butcher paper, just one wrap, because if there's too many pieces of paper between it, you're not feeling how well it's rendered. So we just like one, it holds in as much heat as you want, it lets in as much air as we like to get that bark. That was the first part of the process. The decal is like the hardest part of the brisket to render because it's just like hard fat. So we make sure to face those towards the fire in the first part of the cook. So you can see this is the decal meat, or the decal fat rather. So we just get the fire hitting that all day, and now we're just kind of changing the position a little bit. So we're just gonna leave this closed and open it around, 6 or 7 when we know that there's gonna be a possibility of some of these being done.
I started out in an upscale restaurant, high school, loved the energy and the, being able to cook. And I had a really great chef that served as a mentor for me. Upon graduation, I went straight into fine dining and then turned more towards the wood-fired, flavor first thought process. Cooking with wood, curating flavor, and that being your primary mode of creativity or craftsmanship. Barbecue is that, right? Hours upon hours, almost the entirety of the day spent to create such complexity. The parallels to fine dining are there, right? All right, we're gonna look at these ribs and then get them ready to wrap. This mahogany is starting to come. We got barks starting to set in pretty nice. We see our seasoning level is good to the eye, nice and even. All right, so we have our pork spray. So we're gonna spray nice wet down on these. Then we call this like a spider web, pulling it over. And then we talked about the pillow. So then pillow this coming like this and then folding down. And then we talked about doing that so that we have insulation from the temperature of the grate, because now we have like the flesh side of the ribs. Look at this guy, same deep mahogany. Once it's wrapped, I don't need to mess with it too much. Okay, so we're checking in on our chicken leg quarters. We're an hour and a half to service right now, so we're right on track of getting everything off, because we do need and want everything to get a rest period before we cut. That's important because we're putting all this work in for moisture retention, and we're talking about humidity and all of these things. Just that way when we cut into it, it just doesn't purge all the moisture. So we need to let that temperature balance out, juices redistribute. The next step for these is they rest, and then it's not they're not gonna get cooked more per se. They're gonna get just finished in butter, like on our flat top. And what that is just like ensuring that the skin is crisp, and then just giving it a nice little baste. I'm always worried of it coming across as like chefy. I don't want it to smack of like, it's just like the being intentional. Sure, maybe you call that, being chefy. We're doing a quality check, and then we're setting the warmer for service. Every single piece of meat gets touched. We're looking for like, bounce. We're looking for, all the hallmarks of like, what we want, like just jiggling, resistance on the bottom. So I'm like pushing with my finger. So we're unwrapping and then shingling these in here so that we can reconstitute the bark, get it crispy because we want it crisp. All right. Got our lights on, everything's ready to roll. All right, what can I do for you? Absolutely, half pound? And a side of the peanuts. Dude, first order today, peanuts, Jake. Okay. Part of my family had origins in the South, but moved to the Northeast and then brought these foods with them, such as black-eyed peas. That's on our menu. It never leaves the menu. Black-eyed peas originate from Senegal in West Africa. Traditionally, you would have ham hocks or pork neck bones. We're in Central Texas, so we're putting brisket burn ends in there. What can I do for you? Hello.
Hello, hi. Can I get an order of brisket?
Yes, sir. First of all, I hope they leave with a smile on their face as they enjoyed everything and that they love the technique and that they feel like they understand a little bit more of what we're trying to do. And then maybe they're inspired to go check out more places that serve things like this. You could definitely call this slow food, soul food style. Here's the thing. So with soul food, right, that was a great term that came out of the civil rights movement to highlight contributions and to put an emphasis on these foodways. And so I think over time, like that term, we specified modern African American and isolated these certain things like peas and peanuts and so on and so forth. And that's our way of being more succinct about it.